after you pan left.
Montauk the Magnificent, aka the Wizard of Gore, my friend and yours tonight, Ray Sager. Sorry, Ray. I didn't tell them I was going to do that. Ray, tell everyone about your involvement on tonight's film.
My what?
Your involvement in tonight's film.
Oh, my involvement is nice. I thought you wanted me to talk about Wizard of Gore. Well, I feel sorry, but you haven't watched that. In Bloody Valentine, Bloody Valentine is a Canadian film with an American writer, and when they did the remake, the same. I guess they apparently used a lot of his script, John Baird. And the interesting things at that time, because it was like I think the 81 or something like 80. What was it? 81. 81. Yeah. Was that there was a strike on the States? It was a writer's strike in the States, and the writer was illegally writing up here in Canada, and we were hiding him, and just in case somebody found out and whatever, and they'd throw him out of the union and all that crap. So it was a fairly interesting time. And that was actually a time, if some people remember that a miniseries called Shogun made ratings history because they had nothing else to run on television because of the writer's strike. So it was a phenomenon. Now, with Bloody Valentine, I had AD'd prior to that. An AD is like an assistant to a director. And I had done a thing called Terror Train. And based on that, and I did another one called Funeral Home. This was the first two shows I had done in Canada as an assistant director. But prior to that, I'd been working with Herschel Gordon Lewis. And as you can see, did The Wizard of Gore, and then did a couple other films with him and stuff. Well, a couple. I did about 10 films with him in total, both acting and second unit directing and like that. So when I got hired on Bloody Valentine, which was actually out of Montreal, but we were shooting in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and in an actual mining town called Sydney Mines. And Sydney Mines, actually, it was a closed down mining town, as in the story. And they were using their mine as a tourist attraction. And we came into town, but we didn't tell anybody we were doing a horror film. We kept that kind of a secret because we thought that the local people would be very offended if they found out, we were doing a horror film in their town, and so we just kept that under wraps, and we would tell them all sorts of things. Oh, we're doing a fiction film. Oh, we're doing a documentary. And what we didn't know was that there was a movie called Going Down the Road, which anybody that sort of knows their, Canadian film history. Going Down the Road was a film classic in Canada, made somewhere in the 70s, and by Don Shabib. In it were people from Nova Scotia that came to Toronto, and it was all about, kind of like trailer park guys that ended up in the big city. So we didn't realize that there was any baggage about that Nova Scotia didn't feel they were properly represented or anything like that. So this will come back later into the story. I'm going to give you the part of the story about how I ended up being a second unit director on this. I was actually first ADing. We start falling behind schedule because, and they won't say this in the Toronto screening because the director will be there, and we just tried to do the Toronto screening, but they had a blackout. And they have 3 minutes of what was cut material put back into the show. If you come to Toronto, maybe in April, I think Fangoria is going to screen it there. And George Mahalka, the director, will be there, as well as myself and some of the other people. But when we started running behind, they said to George Mahalka, they said, look, you're going to have a second unit director come in, because we're like stacked up behind on special effects and some dialogue scenes and like that. Somebody's got to come in and do it. And he said, well, and he had approval. He said, well, I will only approve Ray Sager doing it. He said, that's it. So they came to me and they said, will you do it? And I said, well, again, you have to understand, at the time there was a whole bunch of what they call dope shoots, which was like lots of cocaine, lots of amphetamines, lots of continual drinking, lots of, big upper shoots, and people were really fucked up. So, and I was one of them. So I said, yeah, I really had, and you were going to pay me a lot more money to direct. And I said, you have to give me like 2 days to clean up. I said, because I won't be able to direct this. I haven't directed since I worked with Herschel Gordon Lewis. And I said, you have to give me these 2 days to clean up, and then I can come back and do it. So the first scene I had to direct, and you'll see it in the earlier part of the shoot, of the show, is that you'll see there's a mining yard, and the guys come up from the mine, and then they're getting their cars, and they start hot rodding out the door, out the gates of the mining yard, and there's extras walking around and all that. Now, what you will see, because I set up 3 cameras, it's the first shot I'd done, and I hadn't directed in a while, so I set up 3 cameras facing the mining yard, but one of the actors did not have a driver's license, but he had been driving, and I talked to the stunt guys. I said, but this guy doesn't have a driver's license. They said, yeah, but he's been driving. A guy called Kelman was the actor, and he said, no, don't worry about it. So we get the cameras, I call action, we roll on it, the cars start coming out, the way we rehearsed it and choreographed it and all that stuff, and I told him, I said, don't go too fast. So now, and this one car is coming out booting it, and it's Kelman driving, and Kelman goes into a fence. But before he does, I see one of the extras jumping through the air, and I'm going, we didn't stage it like that, this guy. And you'll see, I think it's in the cut, that you'll see one extra sort of going up like that as they come out. So this guy was the last guy on earth you ever wanted to hit, because he was the local supplier of everything. Wine, women, song, dope, whatever. He was the local fixer. And the last guy you wanted to hit. His name was Tiger. So now Tiger's being carried off to the hospital. And I'm like, I want to quit, because this is my first thing I've directed in I don't know how long, and it's a disaster. And they actually, John Dunning, who produced the film, called me, and they all talked me, to keep going, and not to worry about it, and all this stuff. So I did keep going, and I didn't want to go see Tiger in the hospital. So I put it off, and it's like a week and a half later, and I finally decide, okay, I've got to do it. I'm feeling guilty as hell. He's still in the hospital. I've got to go see him, make sure, and make sure he's okay, So for whatever reason, my car wasn't working or whatever, so I take a cab to the hospital in Sydney, and so I'm in the cab, and the driver's making small talk with me. He says, "Well," he says, "what kind of film are you doing here in Nova Scotia?" And but by this time I'm pretty exhausted, and I said, "Look," I've got to tell you the truth. I said, "We're really doing a horror film, a real blood and guts horror film with lots of blood." And I said, so that's really what we're doing. And I'm sick of lying about it. And he says, "Horror film, huh?" He says, "I love horror films." He says, "Me and the townsfolk, we thought you were doing one of those movies that made fun of us all, like that Mr. Shabib did, that Going Down the Road." He says, "We hate him." So now everything was cool, because now we were doing a horror film, and we weren't doing what they feared the most, which was making fun of people from Nova Scotia. So anyway, at the end of the screening, I will continue the story when I do see Tiger in the hospital, and I'll answer any questions, including stuff about Wizard of Gore, I guess, or whatever.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.